Grace is a podcast producer and an account executive for Market Performance Group. She speaks about how networking helped her select Rutgers for her university and continuing to love storytelling through PR. Hi, Grace.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming for this interview.
Thank you. It's been a long time coming. I loved being involved last year, so just really thrilled that you wanted me back.
It is our pleasure having you again. So, can you take me along your career journey?
Absolutely. And I love telling it because it's so different than what I probably thought it would be, especially in high school, but definitely in college. I studied communications and labor relations as my undergrad, and then political science as a master's. And I did an internship in like public relations in the city,
Oh,
right? So I was thinking, I don't know where I want to go. And I kept hearing these like studies or come out, or articles were written of so many jobs that are happening now weren't around 10 years ago.
mm,
And so I keep thinking like the job I'm going to have when I quote unquote grow up, oh, it's just not invented yet. Okay. So that's the approach I had. And I really loved my public relations internship. And I've always been interested in journalism and storytelling. That's why I have the podcast. But honestly, when it came to leaving school and actually
mhm.
getting that job, I had to decide New Zealand or America because I'm from New Zealand originally.
Right.
Very fortunate I was able to stay in America. We could have a whole different podcast about visas, etc. But for the purpose of this, I was able to stay, and I had really good advice from someone that public relations is great, but it's pretty niche down the funnel. Why don't you take a back step and do the whole marketing, like the
Yeah.
account executive, your classic stuff? And that was something that I hadn't studied and didn't think I was interested in. And I tell you, so I graduated in June of 2022. So approaching 2 years ago. And I have been an account exec. I started as a junior at Market Performance Group. And when I began, it's my kind of like one and only job, you could say. But within that, there's so many jobs. I started on the Johnson and Johnson account, which became Kenview. And now I work on this huge New Zealand honey brand called Manuka Dr. Honey. And I love that. And then Fisherman's Friend, which is like this lozenge that is incredibly powerful. And if any listeners tried it, they know. And I do community management, social media, emails. So that's so different from my first job. So when you ask about kind of career and growth, I am prepping myself for a role that I don't think's invented yet. Maybe I'll invent it, but I'm having a lot of fun in the marketing world as an account exec in the time being.
That's wonderful. I mean, that is so cool because having a job where you have fun, who doesn't want that? I mean, you're never really working then, are you?
No, and I'm learning so much, and I got really great advice, and we'll probably talk about advice later, but someone told me your first job out of college, that's like your next degree, right? And from that point, people don't really look at what you did in college as much as they look at what experience you have. And so it was really important for me that I was going to be in an environment where I was learning and it was conducive to teamwork. And as much as it's really fun to be in the fast-paced city, I've taken a job on the Jersey side where the wealth of knowledge from my colleagues, they've been in the game 20, 30, some of them 40 years.
Wow.
And yeah, they just are like, oh, Grace, if you're interested, go for it. There's really, really good learning. And so that's why I've been able to evolve just within the same role.
Wow. That is really cool. So you've gone from different companies, I mean, like for working for different companies, I believe. And so could you tell me some skills that you have developed along the way that bring the most value to you and your work?
Yeah, I think there's hard skills and soft skills. Most people are pretty aware of that. The hard skills, in terms of like my PR internship, was muck rack, incision, and pitching and building like media lists and distribution, all that tangible, relevant stuff. And then in my account exec role, yeah, it's building creative campaigns, client management and client like relations is huge. And unfortunately, reporting and the finance budget stuff, I don't, that doesn't light me up, but it's super necessary. So there's lots of those hard skills, but I'd say the soft skills I think are more transferable and relevant. And
Mhm.
it classic. It comes down to communication, expectations and communication and relationships. Those three things are what I believe has been able to help me kind of excel in my environments, because people only get frustrated or disappointed if they're not hitting expectations. And you only know that if you communicate expectations, and if you're going to be delayed, it really changes the whole like reception of, if you're not going to hit a deadline, if it comes out of nowhere, that annoys people.
Yeah.
But you've communicated in the week leading up, like, hey, I don't think this is going super well. That changes it.
Yeah, I get that. So it's like being active and communicating as to like what is going on. That that makes a big that plays a big role in even if there is a breakdown, the breakdown is mitigated.
Exactly. And as you just heard, I thought I do not disturb myself. We are on Teams, so we get ping all the time. And so we should have mentioned we're hybrid. So we do some in person and some remote. Most people kind of entering the workforce now, or who are semi-new to it like me, are really familiar with that remote
Mhm.
landscape. I thrive off it. I think it's great. You can get a lot done, but then you get the joy of kind of building the team and the team culture when you go to the office. And it's interesting. I mean, Professor Beale does a lot about cross-generational workplaces. And I
Yeah.
interviewed him once about that, because some of those people I before mentioned who have been in the industry for a long time, uh, it's a bit unusual for them. Like, they don't necessarily trust that we're doing work in the
Yeah.
day. Maybe they're just unfamiliar with it. And that's been really helpful talking to Professor Beale about that. And again, expectations of how much I want to communicate and how much they expect to communicate. If you
Yeah.
can line that up, it helps mitigate any kind of confusion or unknowns.
Absolutely. I get that. Yeah. That's really wonderful. And as well as like having hard skills and soft skills, learning them and managing them both. I like that. So could you tell me about the benefits of networking in your field of work?
Favorite topic. I remember you hear like finance people say your network is your net worth. And I
Yeah.
used to roll my eyes, but they're actually so spot on. Every internship or job I've had in New Zealand too, but I'll focus on in America, has come from a referral or a recommendation, because we are in a sea of job applications and AI checking resumes. If there's someone who can refer you just to get a minute as opposed to 10 seconds of someone looking at your resume, that can be the difference. So my internship that happened through Professor Beale and his class, and then my job now for the past like 2 years was through Night of Networking, which the Rutgers athletics department runs. And so I would not have got this job had I not been at a networking event. And it's more than just going to the events, it's the follow-ups. It's the, can I grab a coffee? Can I pick your brain on a topic? That is a whole skill in of itself. And for my podcast too. So the podcast is Tall Poppy Talk. The best situation is when a guest goes, oh, hey, I have these people I think you should talk to. Because rather than me having to cold call, email, or pitch, which I do all the time, and I get great people that way, it's just like, whoa, you've got a direct referral. Same as if someone tells you like, hey, go to this restaurant if you like this. You're like, oh, I trust them, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
trust the restaurant. It's same goes for that. I think networking is really, you cannot emphasize how valuable, and like results, the results that prove its benefit.
Absolutely. So it's like how I mean having the network of Professor Beale gives you the first internship and then building on that relationship from the company gives you your career. I like
Yeah.
that.
So I'm such an advocate for networking, because I don't know where I'd be. And even when, so I came to Rutgers on rowing, like an athletic scholarship,
Mhm.
and lots of schools reach out to you in that instance. But I knew someone who went to Rutgers, Ella, and she was like, yo, you should check out this one. And so even the college I went to came from my
Wow.
network.
Row over to Rutgers.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's wonderful. And so the final piece of this interview is what advice would you give to students at Rutgers or in Sky?
Yeah, well, other than networking, we don't need to dive down there because I think I stressed how
Yeah.
important it is. When I was speaking to Professor Beale's class, I had a question from someone was like, how do you interview well?
Mm.
And my advice to them, and my advice I think is worth sharing again here, is just have a conversation, because these people interviewing you, like I've now done interviews for people. Yes, there's the formalities, the questions you should ask, but what's going to make you memorable is like they have a genuinely enjoyable conversation, and that's just two humans. So I always say, like, if you're in an interview, yes, you should be nervous. That means you care, but it's a two-way street. You're having a conversation with them, and hopefully when they finish the day and they've done 10, 20 interviews,
Mm.
they're not going to remember like those small formal details. They're going to be like, oh, who's that person that I talked about cross-country skiing with, or something completely random. But
Yeah.
yeah, my advice is not necessarily just be yourself, but just have a conversation, because the people you're interviewing with and you're trying to get jobs with also have a life, and they just want to have a
Yeah.
good conversation too.
They're just as human as you are.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. Well, that sums up my questions. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming for this interview.
Well, thank you. And you were such a good interviewer. So people are lucky to be listening to you. And I cannot wait to see what else is going on, because it's going to be a big year.
It is. It's definitely gonna be a big year.